Hello guys, welcome to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host Christy Mason, and today is our first book, The Adventures of Connecticut, Connecticut's Journey to Grand Central Station. It's written by me, Christy Mason, and my aunt, Shelley Awad. Let's dive right into this. The first chapter is called Your Name is What? So let's begin. Connecticut knew from a very young age that he had an unusual name. Every time someone heard his name for the first time, they'd shoot him a quizzical look before they asked the inevitable question, "How'd you get a name like that?" Instead of asking right out how he got his name, some people thought they were being clever by working it into the question. "That's an unusual name," they'd say, raising their eyebrows and waiting for Connecticut to comment. Often he was silent, which made most people want to probe even further into the subject. He knew exactly what they were going to ask. "So, how do you get a name like Connecticut?" This happened to him almost every day for the past 17 years, and Connecticut found it very annoying. To him, it was sort of like taking out stinky garbage. It was something you had to do, whether you wanted to or not. When he did explain why he was named Connecticut, he could sense that most people were sore they asked. When he was asked how he got his name, he usually say, "I'll tell you, but you probably won't like it." Over time, he learned that was a mistake. It only made people more curious. Connecticut explained that his mother, Jody Winger, was the governor of Connecticut at the time of his birth on September 30th, 1993, at Hartford Hospital. Shortly after he was born, a gang of men broke into his mom's hospital room and killed her and his father. The police told his grandmother that his mom was killed because she was the governor. That's not normally the case, but who cares? His mom had received death threats that week, but nobody thought there would be any trouble at the hospital. Luckily, Connecticut was not in the hospital room with his parents when the gang of thugs stormed in. He was down the hallway in the arms of his grandmother. His grandmother took him home and he had lived with her his entire life. Unfortunately, Connecticut never felt safe, and he was always looking over his shoulder. He was afraid that someone, the same man, would come after him someday. Just this May, Connecticut's grandmother had become too old or too sick to take care of him, and she arranged to live in a nursing home. Connecticut peered into the bathroom mirror. He pretended that he was meeting a bunch of new people. He assumed that's what would happen later today. He had been adopted by the Reese family of New York City, and he would be meeting them later just around dinner time. He thought they'd be fun to live with because they lived in the largest train station in the world, Grand Central. He imagined it would be busy on a Friday. A horn tooted into the driveway. Connecticut kissed his elderly grandmother goodbye, picked up his medium-sized, plain brown plaid suitcase, and ran out the door. He jumped into the back seat of the waiting taxi. "Where to?" the cab driver asked. "Hartford Union Station." "Where are you off to?" "I'm going to New York." The cab driver looked at Connecticut in his rearview mirror. Their eyes connected for a moment, and Connecticut looked away. They remained silent during the rest of the ride. It was the end of May, and Connecticut wasn't expecting to be this chilly. He pulled his jacket out of the suitcase and put it on. "Here you go," the cab driver said as he pulled off to the side of the road. "Good luck in New York. I almost said New York City. Connecticut said, "Thanks," and jumped out of the cab with his suitcase. He walked through the front doors of the station and up to the ticket counter. "I'd like one-way ticket to Grand Central in New York City, please." "Coming right up," the ticket lady said with a smile on it, as she laid the ticket on the counter. "You have a nice afternoon. Next." Connecticut grabbed his ticket, his ticket, looked around the room with his big brown eyes, and sat down in the empty seat near a row of vending machines. He put his suitcase on the floor and checked the clock on the wall. It was a few minutes after 3 o'clock. He had about 10 minutes before boarding time. He thought it was a long 10 minutes, as his life, and he thought it was the longest 10 minutes of his life, and he wondered about how time seemed to stand still. Then he thought time was a funny thing, because if you wanted it to go by quickly, it went slow, and if you were having so much fun that you didn't want something to end, it seemed like it was over in a minute. That is true. Connecticut was waiting anxiously to board the train, and that's how he learned that anxious minutes took twice as long as regular minutes. He stopped watching the clock. A lady who sat nearby kept yelling at her kids to be quiet, and that diverted his attention from the clock. Finally, the loud speaker crackled and announced that he could board. He picked up his suitcase, followed everyone else in line, and boarded the train. He looked out the window for most of the way. Connecticut had never been to New York before, and he was excited and nervous about what would happen once he arrived. He was looking forward to seeing New York and Grand Central, and very nervous about meeting the Reese family. The train ride felt like it took forever. 3 hours later, he arrived at Grand Central, and hopped off the train as fast as he could. He walked into the station and took a crumpled picture of the Reese family out of his pocket. Connecticut smoothed out the creases, looked at the picture, and scanned the crowded station. He saw 4 people waving frantically at him. That must be them, he thought to himself. He liked their excitement, and he was looking forward to meeting the twin boys, who were only a year younger than he was. He's been thinking about the twins most of the day. He wondered what they were like, and what it would be like to have brothers. Connecticut smiled nervously at his new family, and raised his hand to wave. Before he could say anything, the Reeses ran over and hugged him. His new mom started crying and slobbering him with kisses. His new dad picked him up in a big bear hug, and Connecticut thought for sure he'd be squeezed to death. Connecticut was known for his dazzling smile, and he couldn't help but smile at the warm welcome he received from the Reeses. Reese's Pieces, buttercups. I'm joking, that's not where I got that from. Smiled back at. He remembered his grandmother saying, "Connecticut, you've got a smile that can light up the world. Whenever you smile, other folks can't help but to smile too." Mrs. Reese smiled back at Connecticut. She placed her hand squarely on his shoulder and said, "Connecticut, you've got a smile that's brighter than Times Square." Connecticut lowered his eyes and shyly thanked her. Mr. Reese slapped Connecticut lightly on the back. "We are so happy to have you join our family. I'm Mr. Reese, but you can call me Dad, and Mrs. Reese here, you can call her Mom. And the twins are Jordan and Christopher." Connecticut thought to himself, "Boy, are those twins ever lucky." Jordan and Christopher Reese wouldn't have to explain their common ordinary names to anyone. Connecticut was amazed on how alike the twins were. He thought it was going to take some time before he could tell who was who. Surprisingly, they were both taller than Connecticut, and they had short brown hair, large blue eyes, and small ears. Small ears. Mom Reese hugged Connecticut again. Connecticut thought the Reeses were really nice, and he was relieved when they welcomed him to join their family. He was He also thought it was cool to have twin brothers. He couldn't help himself. The corners of his mouth turned on into another large grin. When you smile, you make everyone else happy, and they feel like smiling too. What a special gift you have, Connecticut, Mommery said, as she smiled back at him. Thanks. That's what my grandmother always told me too, Connecticut replied, as he brushed his hand through his short, dark hair. New York City needs people like you, Mommery added. There are a lot of people who could be much happier than what they are. Perhaps that big smile of yours will rub off on them. Dad Reese picked up Connecticut's brown suitcase. The Reeses had been very careful not to mention Connecticut's parents. Mrs. Reese thought it was far too soon for Connecticut to learn that she had known his parents. Suddenly, Connecticut's full attention was focused on a tall, pretty girl, with long blonde hair, no doubt, who walked over and stood beside Jordan. She was wearing a red skirt, white blouse, and red high heels. Her black coat was draped over her left arm. Connecticut had to catch his breath. He thought she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen in his life. He was trying not to stare at her, but he couldn't help it. He felt hot under his shirt collar, and he hoped that his face wasn't turning red. Connecticut, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine from school, Kate. Jordan said as he turned to Kate and smiled. Kate extended her hand to Connecticut and said, Hello, Connecticut. It's nice to meet you. This is a long book. It's a long chapter. Don't worry, almost done. We got like in a bit. For a minute, Connecticut was tongue-tied as he held her hand. It felt like electric sparks were shooting up his arm. She was so pretty, he wasn't sure what to say. Connecticut also felt awkward because Kate was about 2 inches taller than he was. He secretly hoped that she liked him, and that she didn't have a boyfriend. Everyone began talking all at once. Connecticut's ears heard only one voice, and that belonged to Kate. Do you like it here in New York? Kate asked in a soft voice. So far I do, Connecticut answered, as he tried to remove the lopsided grin that he knew was on his face. I wasn't sure what to expect when I met my new family. I hope you will call me sometime, Kate said with a smile. Jordan has told me all about you. I was hoping we could be friends. I could show you around New York. How nice of you to offer, Kate, Mommery said. I'm sure Connecticut would appreciate seeing New York. He couldn't believe it. Connecticut looked right into her big blue eyes and didn't hesitate. Yes, that'd be great. He pinched his arm, not sure if this was truly happening. Ouch, he said louder than he wanted to. He wasn't sure if anyone heard him. Oh my God, he thought to himself. She asked me to call her. Kate slipped a piece of paper with her phone number on it into his hand. She waved goodbye as she spun around to leave. Connecticut watched her go with 1,000 wet smiles that could have lit up Times Square. He hoped she didn't think he looked like some lovesick dog or a jerk or something. Geez, it doesn't take you long, does it? Christopher said as he winked and punched Connecticut affectionately on the arm. Christopher stared deeply into Jordan's eyes like a lovesick puppy and picked up his hand. Will you go out with me? I think we'd be perfect together. The twins cracked up. That's enough, boys, Mommery said in a stern voice. Connecticut wasn't sure what to think. He was tired and hungry from the train's journey. All of the emotions he felt were draining him too. He wondered where exactly he'd be living. He thought Mommery could read his mind when she said, Connecticut, you are so lucky. She gave him another hug. We got the biggest house in the world to live in here at Grand Central. Follow me and I'll get you settled in. And best of all, we'll make sure you're very safe. So, Mom Race knows I'm worried about being safe too, Connecticut thought. How, sh- how does she know what I'm thinking? Where do you live in here anyway? Connecticut asked, wondering where on earth one would live inside a huge train station. Is it noisy? Not at all, Mom Race laughed. Follow this way. Do people know you live here? Connecticut asked. Sort of, Mom Race replied. Some do, some don't. Our friends know we live where we live. Many of the workers know us as well, but that's about it. We keep it pretty quiet. They left the area where the trains arrived and walked into the main lobby of Grand Central. It was the biggest room Connecticut had ever seen in his life, and it appeared to stretch for miles. There was a large American flag that hung down from the ceiling. Connecticut thought that the flag must be the size of a city block. At one end of the lobby there was a super big clock. He'd never seen so many people in one place at the same time. On this particular Friday, people were scurrying to and fro in every direction imaginable. Connecticut enjoyed the hustle and bustle of the station. He liked being surrounded by so many people because it made him feel safe. Dad Reese led the way. He walked behind a giant wooden door and stopped in front of what looked like a closet door. He took a skeleton key out of his pocket and turned it into the lock. The heavy oak door opened and he ushered everyone quickly inside. And that is the end of chapter 2. Thank you for watching, and remember to dare to dream. Please comment, subscribe, and like the videos. See you tomorrow for chapter 2 of The Adventures of Connecticut, Connecticut's Journey to Grand Central Station.